One of my favorite trailers at the Game Awards 2023 belonged to none other than Sega, and as somebody who grew up as a massive Sega fan, I didn't actually own the Genesis back in the day myself. I was the SNES kid, but if you had friends growing up back in the 90s and early 2000s, you'd go over to each other's houses and of course play games every chance you got. And I had a couple different best friends to this day that owned Genesis consoles growing up, and I always had a ton of fun playing through various different Sega games that I only had access to when I went over there. Of course, we know where Sega ended up, with the Dreamcast being their final hardware console, and they shifted entirely to being a software developer. And over the years, it seems like their focus has more and more become focused on Sonic. You see a bunch of Sonic games released, some 3D, some 2D, and a lot of different remasters, but you don't see a ton from Sega in terms of their old classic IP that really was the reason that they were once put on the map. Well, obviously that changed at the Game Awards 2023 when we essentially got 5 different classic Sega IP confirmed to be returning with modern visuals, and I'm a huge fan of many of these games. Don't have nostalgia for all of them, but Jet Set Radio, huge love for that game. Actually, most of my time was spent in Jet Set Radio Future on the Xbox, as I did purchase an OG Xbox shortly after it launched, maybe a year or two after it was out, and that's also when I played a ton of Crazy Taxi, because they had Crazy Taxi 3 High Roller release on the Xbox with excellent visuals, and these games are just outright fun. Jet Set Radio felt like a modified version of Tony Hawk in a way, because you're doing inline skating tricks, tagging up the town with graffiti, progressing the story with various different missions, but of course the soundtrack was all bangers and you were just having a blast going through that world. And Crazy Taxi is just like arcade mayhem in a taxi cab that you're just picking up as many civilians as you can in crazy costumes some of the time, taking them to various different spots within the town. But the feeling of speed that you have in each level, that you're basically crashing into cars or almost crashing into them and avoiding them, you're actually getting bonus points for doing that. It's just a game that for me, for whatever reason, I can just spend hours and hours in and have a smile on my face the entire time. Shinobi is another series that I didn't spend quite as much time with, but I will tell you that being a big fan of the old school Ninja Gaiden games and things like that, like ninja platformer action adventure games, are totally up my alley, and I'm super excited to see that one as well. Golden Axe is yet another one that I didn't spend a ton of time with, and I know that that's like a terrible misstep. I need to go back and spend more time with it now, which maybe I'll boot up Golden Axe 2 on NSO. I know we have that added in, but I'll be really interested to see what Sega does with that one, because while we got a very brief look at the gameplay of it, I mean, it does appear to be in 3D, so that's one that definitely holds my attention. Streets of Rage, not so much, just because I haven't played it all that much, but you get the idea. Sega is back in a big way. Hopefully in 2024 with most of these releases that we saw them reveal at this trailer, although we don't have any kind of launch expectation in terms of the timeline, but it does seem like Sega, typically when they announce games, they're ready to pump them out pretty quick within a year in most cases. And you probably noticed at the end of that trailer that there was a little line that read "and more," and so the natural question is, how many franchises will Sega potentially bring back as part of this new initiative that they are branding Power Surge? But it feels like Sega's trying to get back to their roots and have that rebellious style that you remember from the advertisements that says Genesis does what Nintendo don't. They're trying to get some of that edginess and swagger back, and I'm all for it. Well, there was one article that came out shortly after the release of that trailer at the Game Awards that does tie into the leaks that we are about to talk about, because there's a lot of reason to believe that we're getting more Sega games in a big way coming up soon. And even if you don't want to buy into the particular titles that just got their trademarks renewed, which is probably leaking their existence as part of Sega's Big Initiative, you do have this first article which reads, "Sega says reveal of IP revivals is just the start of our initiative." One of the biggest announcements from the Game Awards this past week was Sega's reveal of multiple IP revivals. Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi, Golden Axe, Shinobi, and Streets of Rage were all confirmed to be getting new games, and Sega even showed a little bit of gameplay for all of them. However, you may be curious to know if this initiative, which is called Power Surge, is limited to just those 5 games. Well, according to Sega Co-Chief Operating Officer and Sega of America CEO Suji Utsumi, in a press release for the initiative's reveal, that we are digging into our legacy and reimagining several franchises to bring these games to more audiences around the globe. Today's announcement is just the start of our initiative. And you can then see the following post from Gamatsu over on X, which reads, Sega filed the following 4 trademarks on December 6th in Japan, which were made public today. Altered Beast, Eternal Champions, Jet Set Radio, and Kid Chameleon. So Jet Set Radio is already one of the confirmed games, but the other 3 that got their trademarks renewed are not. And we already know that Altered Beast is playable on Nintendo Switch Online. Kid Chameleon is too. I know that recently got added in. Eternal Champions I don't think is playable, and that's one that I don't have any memory of playing, so not very well versed on it, but I'm excited to see Sega in this direction, and it's entirely possible that they continue to reveal more and more trademarks that we don't know about yet. I would love to see Vector Man be added to this list. That's one that I had a ton of fun with going through as a kid on the Genesis. Vector Man 1 and 2, both masterpieces in my opinion. The mix of platforming and shooting and enemies, maybe it's nostalgia blinders, but I remember that really seeming like a quality game at the time. I'd be curious to see how it's aged. It's literally been forever since I booted it up, but Sega does have a number of different IP that have just been laying dormant, not being utilized at all for years and years. We've continued to see the support for Sonic and some other series, but now it seems like in addition to the Sonic games that I don't think will be slowing down, we might even be seeing multiple new Sonic releases next year in 2024, in addition to the release of Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the movie. There's some rumors floating around that one of them's like a more classic 3D Sonic game, if you can call it that, since now Frontiers is like the new style of Sonic game. So they may even continue to do a fresh 2D Sonic like Superstars. They may continue to do a more classical style 3D Sonic game, and then a more adventurous open zone Sonic game like Frontiers. And so Sonic's going to continue to get a bunch of love, but now it looks like Sega's entire IP library, or many of them, are set for revival, and this is just great news in my opinion. Now clearly we don't know what platforms these games will ultimately make it to. If you just look at what Sega supports currently, they are essentially a shoo-in for a Nintendo Switch release on just about any game, providing that something's not too graphically intensive. We might get scaled back versions. I mean, Sonic Frontiers released on the Switch, and you could definitely make a case that Sega had to put in some extra work to get a Switch version playable, and they knew that enough of their fan base is on the Nintendo Switch console that they absolutely brought Sonic Frontiers over to the Switch. And I would anticipate the same for games like Crazy Taxi and Jet Set Radio, and all of these that are officially revealed, in addition to the ones that seem to be headed for some kind of revamp following their trademark. And I will just be curious at this point what we will see in terms of the timeline of releases for these games, and also a more in-depth look at the gameplay. I'm hoping early 2024 Sega holds some kind of event and reveals quite a bit more of these games and goes into a deep dive, because clearly that Game Awards trailer was very brief. But in addition to getting surprise random drops on Nintendo Switch Online with Sega Genesis games from time to time, and then now we have all of these classic franchises to look forward to with a fresh coat of paint, it is going to be a good time to be a Sega fan in 2024 and beyond. That's where I want to hear from you guys at this point in the video. Which, if any, of these returning Sega IPs are you most excited to see brought back with the modern graphical style and on modern platforms? Are there series that are missing from the list right now that you have fond memories of, that Sega is responsible for, that they could bring back, that you want to see them bring back? And do you think that this is indeed just the start of their initiative, and we might be learning about quite a few more classic Sega games in the upcoming weeks and months from here? So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch the video on screen next if you haven't already. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.